Hi, everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. Today, I have a writer who... by the way, this is Ruben mendive. I keep forgetting to introduce myself. That I admire, that I think is such a, poetic and, just a great writer. I think his writing is very... I don't know. It's, very dreamlike. I love it. But it's also very political and relevant, and I'll stop talking now. I usually have my guests introduce themselves, sort of like a little blurb of who you are, how you identify.
Well, my name is Andrew Cervantes, and I am born and raised in LA, Los Angeles, El Sereno to be specific, and I identify as queer, and I'm a writer and a visual artist. So
okay, so were you born in El Sereno?
I was born in LA, in East LA, and raised in El Sereno.
And where is that?
That is between. It's in Northeast LA, so we're between Alhambra and Boyle Heights, I guess. Okay. We're right by Cal State LA.
Oh yeah. And how would you describe that area? Just to somebody that's never been there, like me.
So now it is, it's always been mostly Latino families. Mm-hmm. We have an influx of different cultures lately.
That's a nice way to say it.
Right. And, back in the day when I was growing up, it was considered a risky part of town. There was definitely gang activity and stuff of that nature. But even then, it was really just working class families and, people trying to find a culture and find something to be a part of. So I think that's where people kind of get lost. And now there's more opportunities. So it's evolved into more of a Latino kind of proud culture,
Yeah. I have noticed that, this comes up at the podcast all the time, how so much of the past, especially when I was growing up in the 90s, it was to assimilate, to aspire for this Americanness that was very steeped in how appropriate you were to whiteness. And now sort of the culture has changed, or is starting to change. The conversation has changed, how we find power in our identity, how our heritage and our differences are our strength.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think growing up, my grandparents and my parents were always proud of their heritage of being Mexican. And my mom is a third generation artesana, so she grew up learning all kinds of arts and crafts from different areas in Mexico from her grandmother. So she had that kind of pride in the traditions. Yeah. And I grew up in that. So I feel like it's being embraced more now. Yeah. It took a while to get there,
Yeah. And that's cool that it was always, because part of our culture is, food, it's crafts, it's, artistry. So it's nice to hear that that was always something that was carried in your family.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really, happy of the way I grew up, that I learned all these different crafts and even arts and crafts that were considered, things girls would do, like knitting and crocheting. My mom's a fiber artist, so she does amazing things with knitting and crochet. But, growing up, she didn't keep any of that from any of us. Anything we wanted to learn or anything she was working on that we seemed interested in, she would share it and we'd learn. And I mean, I think that's helped shape me in that I never felt like there were things that, I couldn't do or couldn't learn because I was, a boy or whatever. But
yeah. And that's good to hear too, that sort of your traditions that were traditionally gendered were able to sort of evolve in your childhood to just be something that was uniquely of your culture, celebrated, and wasn't shielded from you just because, it was supposed to be for girls, you know?
Yeah, it's true. Like I do have there's a lot of situations where stuff like that happened in my formative years. Like we were at my grandmother's house on my dad's side once, and there was going to be like a wedding or quinceañera or something. So everyone was doing some sort of work for it. And I think the men were outside setting something up. The women were inside. Yeah. And the women were inside doing, making like tissue paper flowers.
Oh yeah.
So, I'm running around with the kids, and I was just totally mesmerized by how they would turn like the little pieces of tissue paper into these big flowers. So, I wanted to learn. And I grew up with my mom's side of the family more, my grandma on my mom's side, and my mom and my aunts. So, on that side of the family, I never had to stop and wonder whether, I was going to be allowed to learn something or not.
Yeah.
So I just, sat down and I was watching what was going on. And I asked if I could, show me how to do it, if they would show me how to do it. And, one of my aunts was like, "Oh, no, you can't do this, whatever, And I'm like, well, why not? Well, this is for girls. Like, go outside and help with this or that or the other. And that was like the first time I had heard something like that. I feel like it never registered. If I had heard it before, it never registered.
Yeah.
And so I was like upset, whatever. I ended up playing with my cousins. And then the next day I was at my grandma's house on my mom's side. We were talking, and my grandma was my best friend growing up. So we had deep conversations.
That's cool.
Or as deep as you can get, when you're like 5 and 6. And so I told her, she asked how my other grandma was. And I told her, they're working on this or that. And then I told her, you know what? Like, I wanted to learn how to do this, and they didn't want to let me. And my grandma was like, I'll show you.
Yeah.
And she, my grandma is on my mom's side, isn't crafty really. So, I mean, we got newspaper, and she kind of tried to figure it out, but it was really fun. Like that she was like, forget that. Like, I'll show you. Like, I didn't really learn from her, but I did learn that, like, she didn't care.
Yeah.
Like, she would, whatever I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
She also taught me how to, like, throw a punch. She tied up a flour sack in the garage, and she was showing me how to throw punches. She taught me how to shoot.
Grandma.
She's cool. She's cool. She taught me how to shoot a slingshot. Yeah, I had a lot of good times with her.
Yeah, and
still do. Yeah,
and it's funny how we remember that stuff. How we remember like sort of being shamed as children, to being told like I have similar memories too growing up of just being like, that's for girls. Like, why are you doing that? And me feeling like embarrassed that I even thought, just because we live in such a culture where it's so binary of what's appropriate for what gender, and how adults will shame and police children into thinking what's appropriate for them just because of some like cultural like identity,
Yeah, I mean, and it's so embedded in the culture that I understand most people don't mean anything when they do it. It's just kind of second nature because of the way they were brought up and everything, the way everything's set up in the system already. But I mean, I don't know. I just was pretty surprised that someone told me no, and then the reason for the no made no sense to me at the time. I was like, what?
Still doesn't make sense.
That's like, that's so dumb.
But, so what was like your parents' story, your grandparents' story? Like, what were their lives like? How did they grow up?
My mom and dad were born in Mexico, Cuernavaca, my mom, and the F and my dad. And they came over very young.
Okay.
So my grandparents on my mom's side came over before my mom and her sisters. And they got work in Texas first, and then moved over to Los Angeles with their kids when they went back to collect the children. And then moved to East LA, Boyle Heights. And my grandfather opened a bakery. So we grew up baking bread. Yeah.
That's cool.
So I have a lot of and it's funny that now as adults, like all my siblings and I, like we all bake.
Mm-hmm.
We all we'll have like let's have a contest and see who makes the best cake, or let's have a contest.
I like this.
So so we'll have like, you know, fun, or someone will, like my brother Dan will bake cinnamon rolls, and then that prompts, you know, my other brother, oh, I'm gonna make bolillo, and then my sister's a pastry chef now, so now she bakes something, and like everyone's like, all right, you know, you win.
I love that.
But,
And I'm hungry.
So yeah.
And so like how, like what was like your childhood like? What was like your home life? You know, like sort of going into elementary school, living in like East LA area.
Let's see. I went to private school all my life except for kindergarten, and kindergarten was across the street from my grandmother's house. So my mom would drop me off at my grandma's house before she went to work. She would work at the bakery with my grandfather, so they had to leave and be at the bakery before 5 a.m. So I'd go over. My grandma would wake me up, walk me across the street if my mom couldn't take me on certain days, and then you know, I kind of tested high in whatever standardized test they gave that at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot of time in the classroom. A lot of my time was like getting shuttled between grades and like taking tests. I just remember taking tests every day and getting home exhausted, and my grandmother made sure that as soon as I got home that there was like fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
Like we would do gardening and just digging holes and playing with the mud. Like I just remember have so many fond memories of that, because school was like a pain in my ass.
Yeah.
And then you know, once I started first grade and up, and I was that kid who cried the first day of school too, because home was so fun. Like I didn't want to, like, you know.
That's fun.
But then once I got to private school, like I really started to appreciate school more. And it was interesting because we were like, you know, the Catholic school kids in the uniforms, and then there were the public school kids that went to school across the street from my grandma's house, so I would see them. They were also our neighbors.
Yeah.
So it was like living in two worlds, because you had so many rules to follow at school. At home we had a lot of rules, but when we were out with our friends, they were totally like, you know, a different breed of people. It just felt like, you know, they were kind of crazier, more fun. What
would you guys get up to?
Oh, we used to do all kinds of, let's see. Oh, we would hide things from each other. I don't know why that was so much fun, but like if someone left their bike out, like we would take their bike and like move it 3 houses over at someone else's, like just into nonsense, into mischief, really. We would, well, you know, a lot of times also, by that time I had a brother and a sister, so we would do things like climb the roof at my grandma's house and jump from the roof down into the backyard. I don't know if it's because they told us not to, or we did it and then they told us not to. I don't know the exact order of it, but we would always, you know, push the boundaries there at home too. But, yeah.
I'm jealous. It sounds like a good childhood.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, I will admit. And you know, now as adults, we all still get along. We still hang out and go out for drinks and come together for parties and stuff. So I think the fact that we did have such a good childhood like helps with that. Yeah.
And so like then rolling into high school, you said you were were you still in private school? In
private school. Yeah.
And was it Catholic still?
It was, yeah.
And what was that like? And this is a question I always ask, like, who were you at the time, or like, who were you pretending to be, you know?
Oh, at the time I was, I was a swimmer. I was on swim team. So I think that was kind of one of the big identities I had. My high school didn't have a swim team, but I swam on a club team. And in high school itself, I didn't really like hang out with like a group. I mean, it was popular enough, but you know, I would kind of go back and forth. Like I did hang out with like the football players. I did hang out with the nerdy people. I did hang out with, the more eccentric crowd, the goth crowd, all that. Like I was able to go back and forth, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And did people see you as like, like one of the guys from the swim team, or like, what was your identity
I think, I guess I was the quiet, strong guy. We had this thing called field days.
Yeah.
And it was like, each class participated in games and someone won like a prize, a trophy or whatever. And then freshman year we had one of the events was like arm wrestling, and no one wanted to do it. So I was like, well, whatever, I'll do it. And I ended up like winning. Like, and so from that day, it was like, oh, he's really strong. I'm like, I really have no idea. But it's because I swam, and also I worked at the bakery. So we were lugging around like 100-pound sacks of flour, all this shit, like I was constantly working.
Yeah.
But that was funny. And then I participated in a couple of sports in high school. I played tennis. I threw the shot put.
Man, you were athletic.
One day of football. I'm
guessing you were too nice for football, or
I didn't want to cut my hair.
Oh wow. Was it long, or?
It was long-ish. I mean, everyone on football kind of like had the same sort of buzz cut, and I never knew what that was, but I guess it was a thing, and I was like, no.
Yeah. No. Did your swim team like bleach their hair? I know that's a lot of swim teams do that now. My swim team did that. They bleached their hair. Did yours do that?
No, our hair got bleached from all the swimming.
Yeah.
But maybe.
I want to. That's truly the purpose of this podcast. I would track how where that tradition came from.
That's interesting because I'm thinking back. I'm like, well, I bleached my hair at one point too. So it's interesting to think about, but that may be a thing.
Yeah,
that
the
I
mystery.
Never considered.
So you were still working at the bakery, huh?
Yeah. I worked there. I started working there when I was like, I don't know, 11 or 12. It was a family business. And then in high school, I worked there almost till I graduated. Even when I already had another job as a lifeguard, I was still working there now and then. So, yeah.
I'm trying to like get this picture of you because, I think you're very nice. I feel like you've always been very nice. And then you're like this lifeguard, and you're in California, and then you're like in East LA. Like, this is not really something that I'm used to like imagining or like, what did you do for fun? Like,
oh my God, all kinds of stuff. I was, in high school, since I was on swim team, I had a lot of friends that were already in high school. Because on club teams, like, you swim in different age groups. So I knew a lot of the older kids. So I kind of like would go to, the older parties, and that was a lot of fun. And then, oh my God, swimming, goofing around, like all that stuff. Yeah. I just did,
And what was like the culture at the time? What was like popular?
Well, around like the neighborhood where I grew up, the weekend parties were everything, and you had flyers for them, and you had like party crews and stuff, So there was always a party, and then there was like maybe like 4 blocks from my house there was a street where it was like the street for house parties on the weekend.
Yeah.
So, during the week, you'd collect the flyers and you'd talk to your friends and figure out where you were going to go to. Yeah. And then, I didn't drive at the time, so we had to figure out like who was going to drive if it wasn't one of the ones close to the house. And, it was a lot of that.
Yeah, it's like little mini like party promoters.
Yeah, they were. They were
cool.
Like, I wonder if some of them ever grew up to actually become party promoters.
Yeah.
But they were really good at what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knew about the parties, and those parties were packed. Yeah. I loved those underground parties. There should be more of them. Right?
And so like, once like high school wrapped up, like like what was the plan? You know, like did you have a plan going out of high school? Something you wanted to do?
Well, I wanted to write and illustrate children's books. So,
And how did you come to that as a high school student? You know,
I grew up in a family that, you know, it was a bunch of storytellers, basically. My grandmother on my mom's side, Concepcion, she loved to tell stories and make things up. And, you know, she would go between family histories, telling us stories that way, to like horror stories. Like everyone has, you know, those scary stories your grandma tells you that like scar you for life.
From like Mexico. So
exactly.
Like scary, like
shit's real over there.
There's
like,
something
you know,
like dark Mexican like mythology and like horror to like really unsettle you.
Yeah, exactly. And she also had like, oh my God, hilarious stories. And she could come up with stories like at the drop of a hat. And she loved nothing better than getting us to believe one of her outlandish stories. But most of us like grew up with her, so we knew like when she was, you know, trying to pull one over on us. Except one of my cousins who lived in Anaheim, they weren't there often because they lived so far away, but he was over the house one day, and I think there was like someone selling raspadas outside, and my grandma started a story. She's like, you know, when I was growing up, like that's what I used to do. I used to sell raspadas. And we're looking at her like, no, you didn't. Like, what are you talking about? And we didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
But like cut to like a month later, and my cousin and his family are in Tijuana, and they're waiting to come back, and he's looking out the car window and he sees like someone making raspadas, and it's an old woman, and she has like a block of ice, and she's like just really working, and he starts bawling, and my aunt's asking like, what's wrong? And so he's like, how could you let my grandma do that? Like, why wouldn't you help her? Why'd you make... So then we heard the story, and I mean, to this day we laugh at him about it. He's like, I can't believe like he believed that story.
It worked though.
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, she's told us stories like she trained championship boxers at one point. She ran the most popular brothel in Mexico, you know, for a while there. Just, you know, all these stories. My dad also is a storyteller. He would make up stories for us as we were kids, which is, I think, part of where the writing and illustrating children's books came from, because he would make up little characters, and then the characters would be part of, you know, different stories. And so he was able to make up these stories and continue the storylines, which is really fun. But I think that's where it all came from.
And so now you're leaving high school. You want to be, you know, write children's book, be an illustrator. So, or how did you pursue that, you know?
Well, I pursued it. Well, then I thought, if I'm going to be a writer, I need to like have experiences. So I took like a gap year before gap year was a thing. And I just, after 12 years of private school, I think I just decided to, you know, go out and have an exciting life. And I did. I mean, there's many adventures which influence my writing now. So,
like, where did you go?
Local. I didn't go far. I just went out to do no good. Yeah. So
just like, you know, you're an adult, you want to have like real life experiences. So,
exactly. Yeah. So just a lot of poor choices.
Yeah. Like what? Name a couple.
Oh God.
Yeah, like, because like also, who were you at that time? Who were you trying to be? You know?
Yeah. I mean, at one point, I go danced for about a month or two, and just because there was this club we would go to, and we had been going there. I mean, since we were underage, we were kind of sneaking in, and then we got to know the owner, and you know, he just kept like he was very flirty, and he kept like pushing at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, well, why don't you dance one day? And I was like, oh, I don't think so. But then one day, finally I was just like, oh, I'll try it. Like, it's an adventure. Let's see what happens. And that was fun because I didn't really do much dancing. It was just more like, a little dancing here. And then I just remember there was a pole across the roof, and I reached up for it, and I was like, oh, I can touch it. And then I grabbed it with both hands, and I did like 3 pull-ups. And that was it. Like, everyone was like, what? And it was funny because I was like, I didn't even know like what was going, like that was a thing, but it was a thing. And then I started to understand the kind of what I had signed up for. And yeah, I mean, the groping thing wasn't really for me. So it was like, all right. I mean, I tried that. I can write about it now.
And did your parents know about all this? Your adventures?
Well, I tell them they don't know everything. Yeah, they don't.
I mean, my parents don't know anything. So
when we were like really like we talk about everything, and now sometimes like I'll tell stories, or someone will ask something like, hey, whatever happened there? And I'll just discuss what happened or tell that story, and my mom and dad are like, what? You did what? And I'm like, yeah, I did.
Like, that was a while ago. You don't have to worry about that anymore.
Like,
I'm alive.
So like, when was this? When I was in junior high. You're like, what? Like,
oh my God,
that's right.
Scary.
But yeah.
And so you're having all these adventures, taking your gap year.
Yeah.
Was it just a year?
Oh, no. My gap year turned to like gap 4 or something. Yeah.
And you're just having like, early 20s adventures, being a mess, like doing whatever, having fun. Were you still living at home? Was that like a dynamic that you had to like figure out?
Yeah. So I've always, thought my family's more like, the house is more like a commune. Everyone contributed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never really been, the kind of thing where the curfews when we were younger, the curfews were a thing, but as we got older, it really wasn't an issue. So yeah, I never felt like inhibited by being at home. I was just fortunate. My parents made a conscious decision that they were going to be more relaxed about their parenting style and more open with everything. And that helped so much because this sounds like such a nice little childhood. Like, I'm jealous of your really happy little family. That explains so much about you, by the way, because I'm just like, oh, he's so calm, he's so chill, he's so nice, like, because he just grew up in a nice little household with a nice family, and like where everybody was nice and treated each other right. Yeah, we had our moments, but for the most part, everyone was pretty chill. Like, my childhood was fine. I know I'm fortunate, and I'm really thankful that I was, I had the opportunity to be raised like that, because I know it's not like that for everyone. But it calms me, because
I feel like I'm coming from the opposite energy where it's like so it's nice. I always like I also interviewed Cinnamon, and she also gives you that same kind of calming energy where it's like I'll look around and be like, no, it's fine, just relax, like, because I feel like I'm such a high frequency, you're a little more like laid back, and it's a good energy, and I feel like it's not something we really like admire people for. I think the loud, ambitious, like abrasive people get a lot of the attention, when the calmer, like just more chill people, like not everything's a huge deal, like is appreciated, is all I'm saying.
Oh, thank you. But I don't know, I've always I get that a lot. Like, sometimes people think I'm too chill. Like, I've had like in more than one relationship, I've had my boyfriend at the time tell me like, you never get mad, like what is that like? And it doesn't mean I don't care, it just means I'm still invested. I just, I don't feel like everything has to be a fight. Like,
Yeah.
there's no,
Yeah.
we're human. We're going to piss each other off. And,
Yeah.
And then what? Like, then we have to hang out afterwards. So I don't.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And like growing up, did your family ever travel? Did you ever visit Mexico?
We did visit when I was younger. I really, as an adult, want to go back and visit because I've never been to Mexico as an adult, really, other than like Ensenada or like Tijuana. But like, I want to go to Mexico City.
Yeah.
I applied for a theater festival in Mexico City, so hopefully that happens.
Yes.
And then I'll have a reason to go.
Yeah.
And I'll have a paid reason to go.
That's
so
always nice.
Better.
No, yeah, Mexico City is a great city. I would live there, honestly. It's such a cool
I keep hearing
place.
that like everyone that I talk to about it is just, like kind of obsessed with how beautiful it is and just like the culture of it and everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I feel like it's gotten like an uptick in like tourism lately. I don't know if this is like this fetishization of like Mexican culture and Frida and all that crap.
Right.
But yeah, it's like it's becoming more of a popular destination. And it's a great city, so I'm happy for it too because it's a great place. Oh, I was also born there, so I have vested interest. All right, so after your gap year 1 through 4, like what were you up to that?
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I decided, okay, like it's time to refocus. And, that whole time I was still like either painting or writing or journaling. And I've always had this, I don't know if it's probably an obsession, but if I hear a good quote or someone says something that speaks to me, I'll write it down. So I had like journals and pages with all these quotes, and I would go back and do collage work based on the quotes or write little stories based on the quote. So I thought, okay, let's see what happens. So I started off in English, and I was having a great time studying English, and then I decided to take some art classes, and then I ended up focusing on visual arts, just because a lot of what I grew up doing in terms of arts and crafts was relevant in the art classes, but it wasn't treated as it was relevant. So a lot of times, like the folk art was talked down on, like in our art books and art history, there's very little required, about folk art, and there's a few Mexican artists that are mentioned. That it was interesting to me that so much of it was like Western culture. When I knew there was so much of like our own Latino culture that was artistic and creative, and through studying it, you see that the styles are similar, the basics are they're equal, like so I just I think it was the community organizer in me decided that, all right, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna like focus on visual arts, and I'm gonna start erasing that line between fine art and folk art. And it was a battle. Like a lot of times I was taking a sculpture class, and I decided to make a piñata for my last piece, and I really had to argue over the fact that it was considered that it should be considered sculpture, which like now I can't believe I was like that invested in it, that I would argue with the professor over like, no, tell me why this isn't a sculpture, like what is missing, because I'm following everything, all the guidelines that are set out, and just because someone's sculpture is made of clay, I mean, what distinguishes this from the other?
Yeah, and very much, representative of how you grew up. You saw the value in it, you know? And and you're right, it is crazy how like crafts or folk art from like Latinx communities is seen a lot as like more from an anthropology aspect, where they're like, oh, this is the craft they develop, and like, you see those like in a museum, like, oh, look at these baskets and these like things that they're creating, but you're right, it isn't really seen as an art form, as
Right.
like an expression. It's seen so much more as like something for use for everyday life, which it can be, but there's also like this is done as a skill, as an art form.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's really not. It's like very much taken like, oh, the side of the road, like trinket you can get, but
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. It's taught as like from an anthropological aspect, which is like, this is the folk art of this culture, almost as if it's like looking back at cavemen or something. Like this is where it all started.
yeah, like, isn't it cute? This is how they make their baskets, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, there's a
but the culture itself, they take things that are useful because it's a working culture.
Yeah.
So they make things that are everyday beautiful. They have to, have a function. There's not a lot of houses or families who have expendable income where they can spend $5,000 on something that's just going to sit there.
Yeah.
These are a lot of times families that if they have that kind of money, they need to buy more than one thing, and it has to have more than one purpose.
Yeah.
So, but does that make it less than that painting that's worth $5,000? It's just I think it's all perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that you were doing that in your art classes, just being like really like standing up for like and putting value in the stuff that your family created and like developed throughout generations.
Yeah. And I think that's really where my arguments came from. It's like, well, you can't tell me like things I grew up in, things my family do are not valid.
Yeah.
They're valid. And I'm proud of like everything I learned growing up and everything that my family's done. So I think that probably more than anything led to me arguing for the validity. But like now, I don't know if I would argue as much, because I feel like I'm at a point where I understand the value of it, and you don't have to understand the value of it. It doesn't like diminish the value if the other people don't understand it. I think that's just because global culture is so different now that, one or two people might not get it, but there's a bigger majority that do get it.
Yeah. Yes. Arguing that something is of value to a scale that never really accounted for it anyway. So it's like, for these parameters, I'm arguing that this is it, but it's like those parameters are bullshit to begin with. So,
exactly.
Yeah. I love that. All right. So you're taking these art classes, like, like where are you, like, where's the storytelling, the writing coming in,
The storytelling and writing at that point is kind of like on the back burner. I still write in my journals. I still, at the time, I think it was more poetry that I was writing. And you're in your early 20s, mid 20s, and you have all those feelings.
Yeah.
So poetry is like a great way to sort all that stuff out. So I would participate in poetry readings, and I would submit for anthologies and things like that. But visual arts was where I was focused at the time. And then, a few years later, I decided to start writing that children's book. And I think it's still in that phase. I don't think it's gone very much further than when I decided to start writing the children's books. Because at that point, I had more adult stories to tell. That's kind of where I ended up going. I started writing short stories and poetry still. And then I took a writing workshop for theater work. And I had never participated in drama or anything like that in school. So it was all new to me. But it was fascinating to tell a story in that format. And to think that, the words I'm writing are going to be coming out of an actor who's going to bring my character to life. That was really interesting and a little scary, and I mean, that's where it all started.
Yeah. And what sort of got you, and what sort of, like, what made you take that theater class?
What made me take the theater class? I just thought, I'm a better writer when I'm held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for a writing workshop where we'd meet every now and then, and we would discuss what we're writing, and I wanted the critiques and I wanted to grow. And at the time, I think that was the first one I saw.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went for it. And then a couple years after that, maybe 5 years after that, actually, my friend started a writing workshop for Q Youth called Eastside Queer Stories. Mm-hmm. And I participated in that. And that was oh my God, that was life-changing, actually, because it was such a great group of people. And you had so many different perspectives, like people that were already playwrights in their own, and you had, people that were just starting out and just had stories to tell. And it was in this environment that just encouraged everyone. We were critiquing each other's work, and we were reading each other's work, and there were writing prompts, and it was such a positive experience. And that was my first play that got produced was part of that. And it was interesting to see that on the stage, because I wrote that play based on a breakup that I had. And I mean, I'm fortunate. I think that I've had pretty decent breakups. Like, I still talk to most of my exes.
I'm not surprised.
but like, that one was particularly funny. And so I always thought, like, as it was happening, the breakup was happening, I'm like, this is like a movie. Like, this does not happen to anyone else in anyone else's life except my, this would only happen in my life.
So what was the play about?
It was about a couple, and they were celebrating an anniversary. So one of the characters goes and he puts on like this baseball uniform, because the main character, Babe, has a uniform fetish. Oh. So he puts on a jock strap and like baseball socks, and comes out with a bat, and they're celebrating the anniversary. And then halfway through, the celebration, the boyfriend just blurts out, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's almost exactly what happened in the relationship. In actuality, what happened was, like, we were celebrating our anniversary, and he seemed like distant, but he's also a computer programmer. So he had moments where he would just get like locked into his mind. So I was already used to it. So I just, chalked it up to that. And then I was like, all right, so, and I had planned this whole like, uniform thing, the baseball uniform thing. So I was like, all right, I'm going to like go change and I'll come back. And I did. I came down, and his reaction was exactly what I wanted. So we started like making out and everything. And then as it started to get like more intense, like he pulled away, and I was like, what's wrong? And then he told me, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm shocked. Like, first of all, the timing is totally his kind of timing. Like, he was so in his head that he was terrible with like the timing of things. He would say things at the worst possible time. And I was like, all right, let me like take a breath, and I'm gonna go change or actually put
this
clothes
is a
on,
play. Like
right?
this is a natural like story.
Right? I was like, oh my god, like only this would only happen to me. And then so I had to go and I got dressed and we sat down. We had a really good talk, but there's nothing wrong with him. He's a great guy. I still talk to him now.
Yeah.
He was a great guy then, but sometimes things don't work out.
Yeah.
You know, and no one was to blame for it. It just had run its course. And so I always thought it was funny the way it happened. It had to happen, but the timing of it would only work with me. I can only imagine it.
That's funny.
But yeah, that play like resonated with a lot of people, which was interesting because I was like, no, that can only happen to me. But it happens a lot.
Yeah, like I say this all the time on the podcast. If there's one of you, there's a million of you.
Yeah,
so, and that's good because then our stories like matter and people connect with them and they like change or like relate in a way that if you hadn't put it out there, people like if that had happened to them, they were probably thinking this only happened to me.
And that's where I was. I thought like this could only happen to me. And after the play, you know, it did resonate with a lot of people because there were people coming up and talking to me and saying, "Oh my God, that almost exactly happened to me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "How could that even happen? Like, do you know Alex?"
Yeah, all his exes,
right? But it's funny, and I think that's part of the time, or you know, what helped me realize the importance of telling these stories and encouraging people to come out and tell their stories is because they are individual to us, but they're also universal. You know? They're just stories about relationships and people, and you know, that's life.
It's like about people's journeys and the truth, and like that's universal. The truth is universal. Like when you say something that you're being genuine, and it's like on a stage or a film or a movie or a novel, it clicks with people because they're like, oh yeah, like that's my truth too, you know? Like, yeah. So you did, you know, you said this was the first one you got produced? Yeah. All right. So like, did you like get bit by the bug?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was saying, it's the fact that, you know, I realized that the stories connect with so many people, and I've always felt like, you know, there wasn't any story or movie that really spoke to me in terms of what I had lived and where I grew up or anything like that. And then seeing not only my play, but all the other plays that were produced at the time, talking about like that kind of community. Yeah. And, you know, the people that I grew up with, you know, like the Cholos who were like, everyone was afraid of the Cholos, but you grew up with them. So you knew them since they were little. So you really weren't scared. Yeah. And, you know, the gay Cholos like that, like it surprised me that not everyone knew that there were gay Cholos.
I just found out about this like maybe a year ago. So,
you did?
Yeah.
That there were gay Cholos?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
interesting.
I want to have a gay Cholo on the podcast, by the way.
You should. You should. I can reach out to some people.
They just have to be writers.
That's tough, but we'll see. We'll see what we could do.
I mean, they could write anything. Like, you know, I'm open to all writers. You know?
Oh, okay. In my neighborhood, you know, there were a lot of gangs, and you know, there were cholos in the neighborhood, and I knew like at least 4 of them who were gay, and those 4 weren't even like with each other; they were with other gay cholos. So I knew that there were more than 4. I know, it was a thing. Yeah, there used to be a lesbian bar by my house, and I had gone in there a few times.
Just to use the bathroom.
Oh yeah. No, well, I was a bar, and I would like meet up with friends there, like, well, like pick me up here or whatever. But it was interesting because, you know, it was a local bar, and it was a tiny hole in the wall. It couldn't have been, you know, bigger than a shoebox, but everyone there was from the neighborhood. So you had, you know, some really, you know, masculine women there, you had some very feminine women there, you had some cholos there, and it was kind of like everyone kind of knew each other from the neighborhood, so it was really cool. Like no one was, you know, setting anyone off. There weren't any like issues really. It was just kind of like, we're gonna have drinks and talk, and And it was really cool to see kind of that, like, those masculine lesbians like just really giving the trolls a hard time. That was hilarious for me because they didn't care. Like, neither one of them cared, and they would just be talking so much shit to each other. And so, you know, growing up, I had seen that, so that was just part of my reality. So it's interesting when other people don't, like, they're like, wait, there's gay cholos? I'm like, dude, there's gay everyone.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
But you had the neighborhood gay bar so that there was a space where those people could go, and then you knew they existed. You know, if that bar wasn't there, you'd probably be walking around being like, oh, I'm the only one around here.
Yeah, I'm wondering like how that bar even came to exist. There actually, it was called the Plush Pony. There was a retrospective on it. I think it was at ELAC. And they had all these photographs of the Plush Pony and all the patrons that used to be there. I used to go, and I didn't go to the exhibit itself, but I read an article on it. And I remember looking at one of the pictures, and I'm like, oh my God, I know that. Like, I had seen that lady at the bar, you know, and I'm like, I know this man.
Yeah.
Like, he used to, and not that I was there all the time. It's going to sound like I was there all the time. Like, you know, I went a handful of times.
Sure.
But, like, you know, I know the story because, you know, the lady at the bar would tell everyone's story. So she said that he was, you know, some straight guy, and he lived like a few blocks up the street. So he would come down and have drinks and then stumble back home. And sometimes his wife would come down and get him, and they'd have drinks and walk back. And I was like, you know, this is crazy. This is like, he doesn't even care, you know, that it's a lesbian bar, that there's gay cholos here or anything. He's just like, dude, this is my local bar.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and he knew people, and he would come in and just like, you know, like the few times I'd seen him there, he you know, knew the bartender by name, and he knew like the I don't know, like the bar jockey, the lady who was there.
Oh.
She was just a bar goer.
Bar
but
fly.
She was bar fly.
Yeah.
Bar fly. It was cool, but yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I love
interested
that.
to know like how that came about.
Yeah. That's going to be the spin-off podcast.
Okay.
Finding the Plush Pony or whatever.
Plush Pony, yeah, 2020.
Yeah. So with your writing, are you more focused now on playwriting? Is that your main form of expression, or do you still do other kinds of writing?
Mostly it's playwriting.
Yeah.
I'm, you know, I love the 10-minute theater, 10-minute play format, just because I think it's such a challenge to tell a complete story in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There has to be character growth. And I mean, so much to pack into 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And
like on one stage, like it's not like you could do 10 scenes in that time, you know. It has to be very condensed, and there's limitations to, you know, the 3 walls and the audience watching, you know.
Yeah. I love that format. It's a pressure, I think, because, you know, even when I'm working on like a project that I have like for a client for visual arts or whatever, I'll wait till the last minute, because I don't know, that pressure just, I feel like it brings something out. But so I write a lot of 10-minute plays and you know, submit for festivals, and I'm writing a couple of full-length plays, and yeah, mostly theater and you know, storytelling really is what I guess.
And what is there, like a central theme through your plays? Are you always writing the same, you know, like, is there something in you that's always you're trying to convey through your playwriting?
I think like I always want to make sure that my characters are well developed. I like character driven work, so I like to give the audience a sense of history for these characters. They aren't just random people meeting. These are people that have history. And I like to play with people's idea of gender. So, you know, growing up in Latino culture, it's, you know, gender is it's very divided. You know, it's black or white, but that's not reality. And it's not the reality I grew up in. Yeah. And I don't think it's a reality a lot of people grew up in. So I think that's why I think Latinx is so important as a term. Yeah. And there's so much fight back about it, but it's really about acknowledging the fact that gender is, it's fluid. Like,
yeah, because it's not the X isn't just for to be inclusive of male and female. It's for the whole spectrum of gender,
Exactly,
and then that is something that I don't know if people think about a lot. I think they're just like, oh, Latinx, what's wrong with Latino,
Right.
Even because again, that is a dominant term used. Like there are women that will call themselves a Latino woman,
Yeah.
like that's how like dominant it is, and I think people definitely see it as like a binary type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did have the opportunity to see one of your plays.
Oh yeah, you did.
And can you tell us a little bit about the festival and sort of what it's about and what your play was about?
Sure. It was for the Frida Kahlo 10-minute theater festival, and I think you saw Gentrifier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Gentrifier was about two friends who were formerly a couple, and where they find themselves today. A lot of times when I write plays, I like for people to be peeking in on a moment in life.
Yeah.
And when I direct, I don't, I really don't like my actors to face the audience unless there's a reason for it. So a lot of times my actors will be like, but we're supposed to cheat out. And I'm like, no. Like, not with this one.
Cool.
So I just want like the audience to feel like they're kind of spying on a moment, or they're catching a glimpse of something going on. But it's about two guys who had been in a relationship, and it didn't work out. There was cheating, and now they're at a point where the bad boy is reformed, and he's making a play for the ex.
Yeah.
So
who's now dating a gentrifier?
Dating a gentrifier. Yeah.
And was it neighborhood specific? I'm trying to remember.
No, it was just
Yeah. And I think it was an interesting play because again, like you said so much, and just their personal dynamic, how things used to be, how they grew up, and then they find themselves at this gentrifier's party where they know a mutual friend, and he doesn't know that like his ex is dating
the gentrifier.
Yeah. and it's funny because it speaks about like differences of culture, and I really enjoyed your play. When I went to go see it, I went to go see it with my white boyfriend. So people were just pointing at him, calling him gentrifier. They're like, "Oh, is this about you?" I'm just like, listen, is he a white suburban boy? Yes. Is he complicit? Yes. Is he a gentrifier? Maybe. But don't call him that to his face. Our friend Jaime still says, "Oh, how's it going with the gentrifier?" Like he's not in the neighborhood yet, okay? It was an interesting dynamic for you to talk about because I think there's a lot of plays about gentrification, a lot of stories being told, but your focus was on the old neighborhood couple, and how they sort of like were working out their own personal dynamic in this general, conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of, it's happening. Gentrification is happening.
Yeah.
But, the idea was never to make the whole play about gentrification.
Yeah.
This is like the reality. Like, there are different cultures moving in, and then inevitably someone's going to date someone from a different culture, and then someone who hasn't gotten comfortable with that notion yet.
Yeah.
There's going to be interaction, and I date, I mean, every race. But I have, dated white men before, and I've heard it from friends.
Yeah. Like, how has a white boy? I'm like, he's fine.
Yeah. It's never like, he has a name, He's not the white guy. Or, the friends that are like, you're dating a white guy? I'm like, well, yeah. Like,
yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And of course, that comes from just like, there's a history to that, It's not like It's not like they're like, oh, there's this like new white person that you're dating. It's like for so long we were so segregated, working in our own communities, dating in our own communities, and you know, even now to venture out, it's I mean it's a lot better, but it's still there's still a culture change, there's still a culture shock between the couple. So, and again, like your play wasn't really even about that, you know, it was about this one like couple that had broken up and all their stuff that they were, you know, grappling with, and it was just based in the setting of this gentrifier's house, you know. And you directed that too.
I did, yeah.
And was it your first time directing?
No, I've directed a few others. I never had the intention of directing. I was always going to be behind the scenes, and then an opportunity came up to co-direct with a friend, and I said sure, but just know that I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know? And they were really encouraging, and you know, they told me you're basically telling a story. So that made it easier for me, and then through that I learned some of the language to how to convey what I wanted to the actors. Yeah,
that's a skill for sure.
Yeah, it is.
And so, like, what are you working on now? Like, what do you have going on?
I'm participating in the Brisk Theater Festival in July, and I'm directing Better Than Grinder by Cesar Carmona for Brown and Out 5. And I'm writing a couple of plays. I'm writing a play called Whitina, which is about a light-skinned Latina who everyone thinks is white, and the issues that kind of brings up.
Yeah.
So my sister-in-law has blonde hair, blue eyes, and freckles.
Oh, very white Tina.
She's so white Tina.
I think she might just be white. Like,
yeah, no.
At that point, I think it's a surprise to Tina. You know?
Oh, it's totally a surprise, because sometimes, you know, and I put this in my play, but how people make snap judgments. So they'll talk about her right in front of her in Spanish. Yeah. And then she knows what they're saying. So for me, it's always like delicious to hear them find out that she knows what they're saying. Yeah,
I definitely want to get like a definition for like white Tina and like white Tino, just because is there a white LatinX? I don't know, but like
there must be, right?
There must be, I guess. I don't think I've ever heard it, but like, cause I you know, does it come down to like you know, racial, like, is it genetic? Is it your appearance? Is it like what classifies like a white Latino, you know? Like I'm trying to, because I'm really like, you know, this podcast is also about, you know, Latinx people and our proximity to whiteness, and how, you know, at some spectrum, part of the spectrum, we can totally be like, I hate this word, but passable.
Right.
And but then there are, you know, Latinx people that, you know, are mistaken for, you know, I was talking to this Puerto Rican guy, and he says, I register as black in LA, you know? So I want to get like, is there like a paid chip with like, because I honestly want to know, because I get that too sometimes. I get like I was at this like writers group, and they're like, oh, well, you're white. And I was like, and again, it's like, it's a complicated history, because I'm like, it's like, it's sort of the thing like, wait, am I a white Tino? Like, because you know, I'm like born in Mexico, you know, my story is a very much immigrant story, but that can also not apply. There are like Argentinians who can be very blonde and blue eyed, come here,
right?
And they could be like, well, I was born in another country and I am an immigrant. So, you know, it's an interesting dynamic of like, you know, whiteness is also relative to whoever, you know, like I don't feel that way about myself, but a lot of times, you know, Latinx people will treat me like as an outsider.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I'm from, like, I'm one of the...
No, I'm actually from Mexico.
Yeah, and it's also like, I'm from the neighborhood, like, but, you know, based on, you know, it's a bunch of things, how you dress, how you talk, you know, the shade of your skin, just, again, perceptions that we have just on looking at each other. But I think that's definitely an interesting topic for you to delve into because, you know, it's another also way of being like, you're not Latinx enough, you know, like.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it falls in line with the types of stories I tell because it might not be, at this point, there's no like question of gender, but it's a question of, you know, that perception. Mm-hmm. Is she white? Is she Latina? Is she Latinx? Like where does she find herself? And what does she, you know, view herself as?
Yeah.
That, you know.
Because, I was just listening to this podcast. Shout out to them, Latinx POV. But they were talking about, like, identity can be, like, 3 different ways. And one is, like, how you see yourself, how the world sees you. And then I think the last one was, like, how you perform to the world so the identity you want them to see, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that as Latinx people is very relevant, you know? Because you can have an idea of yourself and then someone could come in and be like, no, you're this. And you're like, oh, is that how people see me? You know, or like.
Isn't it always interesting to find out how other people see you?
Yeah.
Because I have this very like vivid image of how I see myself. So it's always interesting to see like, oh, you see that? Like,
yeah.
You know.
I know. I was talking to someone, they're like, oh, you're very nice. And I was like, you don't know me at all. That's another way I get like, oh, thank you, I guess. but yeah, it is you know, it's all about your perception of yourself and how others perceive you, and that's a constant thing about identity, you know, trying to find yourself in that while other people are telling you should be something else. Let me know when this play goes up. I want to see it.
Okay, I will.
All right, so I want to ask you about, you know, other Latinx writers, artists that you admire, people that you think maybe I should interview, people that, you know, the world should know about.
I'm totally inspired by like these Latinx writers that are coming up, that are, you know, my peers. Like, I think if you have an interview with Cesar Carmona, you need to interview him because he has such an interesting perspective. Like, he identifies as like a geek and a gamer and Latino, and I mean, he's just so many different things. And the, you know, the reason I applied for to direct Brown and Out, there were like 3 plays in there that I wanted to direct, and his was one of them. Because I just thought like it was such a cute perspective about like, you know, finding love while you're doing something that you love.
Yeah.
You know? Like Pokemon. Like,
yeah.
No one, I mean, I don't think many people would associate that,
yeah,
you know, as a
like
place to pick up or find
love.
But it, you know, there's that saying like, if you just do what you love, you'll find someone who, you know, agrees with you. So I thought that was a really good story. Abe Zapata Jr., have you heard of him?
I'm like low-key Instagram stalking him.
Oh, really? He's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked with him with East Side Queer Stories. And I just think he has so much to say.
Oh, yeah.
He's interesting. I mean, if you haven't been to Pocha, his event, like, check it out. Like, it's so fun.
Wait, what is it, though? I want to go now.
Oh, it was... the one I went to was probably 2 years ago, and they just had another one this last year. But,
so I'll catch it in 2 years.
I think there's going to be another one this year.
Better.
But it's basically a cabaret style of event. And, I mean, there's drag involved. There's theater, music, artwork. It's just a celebration of everything queer and Latinx.
I am excited to see his work. I know he has the Borracho coming out at the Fringe Festival, the Hollywood Fringe Festival. I want to see it because I haven't seen any of his work, but just the people that he's friends with, people that have been involved in the projects. I'm like, oh, I should check him out. So he is on the list.
Oh, good.
I just have to reach out to him. But I want to see his work first because I also want to I love to gush. And I only invite the writers that I have crushes on. So anyone that I think is like like if anyone would ask me this question, it'd be like anyone that I've had on this podcast, because I think it is important to like really be excited about your peers and the people that are doing similar work and that are doing good work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we encourage each other, and there's a lot of us out there that are trying to tell the stories, trying to make things happen, trying to that hashtag representation matters. Like, I fully believe in that, and I think until all of our stories are out there, I mean, there's no time to stop. Like, right now we got to keep going. And that's why it's important. I thought it was important to be part of this, because I want people to know what's going on out there. I want people to know, like, hey, have you checked out this person? If not, listen, like, check them out, see what's going on. Eastside Queer Stories, like, I mean, look them up. That's a 10-minute play festival, and it's all queer people of color. Yeah, a lot of good stuff coming out of there. Yeah, and I mean, not just because I'm part of it, but the reason I'm part of it is because I believe in it. Yeah, and you see it when you see the work going on. You're like, oh my god, like everybody needs to know about these people. Like, like, and that's what I love about getting to know other writers. It's like everybody's different. Their whole journeys are different. Their experiences, who they are as a result of like where they come from. And as Latinx people, that's not something that is black or white. It is so many different identities and experiences that when you go into meeting other writers, you're like, oh, everybody has a story. Like, it's crazy how you'll like meet all these like other Latinx writers, and you're like, we're all telling like such different stories that are so uniquely us. And it's great to see just like how a lot of people are just natural storytellers that we need to celebrate and like shout out. There's part of a project that I was working on with my mom, and we're still trying to figure out like how to put it together exactly. But my friend and I have a nonprofit, and it's arts based, so we do a lot of arts activities. And what I've encountered time and time again is that as a culture, we share stories when our hands are working. So it goes back to like my mom and my aunts making tamales, and they're working with their hands or carrying on this tradition, and then inevitably the storytelling starts to happen. And they remember this person or that person, or they tell stories. And when we were doing art activations, I noticed it's not just my family, it's like it's a cultural thing. As these people were sitting down and creating, they started to connect through storytelling. So we'd have multi-generational projects where we have seniors sitting with teenagers working on projects, and inevitably they both start sharing stories and start talking, and the connections are made. And we want to get some funding to do some sort of workshops, but I just think that's part of our culture is storytelling. It's an important part. So. And it's like representation does matter. That's why it's such a shame why I started this podcast, because it's like someone needs to know. The people have to know, not only that like our stories are told on a grander scale and universally, but that we know that we're out here for each other, that we're a community, that like I think so much as writers and like as Latinx people and as just people, we think we're so alone and the only one of our kind. Right. And that also leads me to my next question. You have my guests help title their episode. So there's a format, but the purpose of it is that your title will be an identifier to you, your story, sort of what your journey has been, so that other people who have that same experience or similar can be like, oh, I didn't know there was someone else like me. Like, and it's also as a motivator for the people who see all these episodes going up, be like, oh, they haven't told my story yet. Like, I should reach out. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. So you have to fill in the blank, and you can move them around. You can add as many words as you want, but that'll be part of your episode title. So something that is uniquely you, or something you want to rep, I guess I would want to incorporate Glittering Andy. That's my like hashtag in my work and stuff, but it was a name given to me by my sister. After, I was working on some artwork, and then we went out, and I guess I had glitter all over me. And she said, "Oh my God, you're glittering Andy." And I fucking loved it. Like the minute she said it, I was like, that's me.
Yeah.
Maybe like glittering Andy, a badass Latinx writer.
Perfect. Glittering badass Latinx writer. All right, that's the episode title. All right, so tell the people where they can find you, your handles. I know you're also like a full artist too, and you sell things. So if you want to shout that out too.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram hashtag or at glittering Andy. Also on Facebook, but it's not as developed as my my Instagram. You can catch me at local art fairs and events, and I mean, look me up. Don't be afraid to like message me if you have questions.
Yeah, reach out, builds community.
Yeah. And if you want to like learn more about any of the festivals that are coming up that I'm a part of or that I know of, like I'd be more than happy to share that information.
Perfect.
Yeah, like we're going to be working on a writing workshop for Frida Kahlo 10-Minute Theater Festival 2020. So that's coming up if anyone's interested.
All right, they'll hit you up then.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, and I look forward to seeing many, many more plays from you. I always enjoy them.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me. And I really am a fan of your plays as well. Like,
I'm going to cut this part out.
Well, no, I really do love your play.
Thank you.
So it was one of the 3 that I was interested in directing. So
we can do the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deal.
I would love to see your style of like